It was mid-October, and my partner and I had pulled our van over for the night at a quiet little turnout just off State Route 89A, somewhere between the beautiful red rocks of Sedona and the town of Cottonwood. The air was perfectly crisp, that amazing desert smell of creosote and wet dust after a brief rain shower. The spot was simple. Flat, near a dry ravine, what they call a wash, with low brush. About 200 feet away, there was one other camper, an older guy in his 60s in a blue Sprinter van. He kept to himself, didn't wave, and didn't bother us. It felt safe, exactly the kind of quiet solitude we loved. We cooked dinner, packed up, and settled down. But our golden retriever, who usually passes out the second we stop driving, was completely wired. She lay at the foot of the bed, chin resting on her paws, staring intensely into the dark wash like she was waiting for a signal only she could hear. We told ourselves she was just hyped up from the day's hike. The stillness and the warning. Around 11 o'clock, that perfect desert quiet deepened into something else. A held stillness that made you unconsciously hold your own breath. I was just drifting off when our dog let out a sound that wasn't a bark or a whine, but a low, guttural noise deep in her chest. It was a sound of primal dread. She didn't lift her head. Instead, she slid off the bed and frantically crawled deep into the dark space under our platform bed, pushing as far back as she could go. No amount of calling her name brought her out. My gut seized up. I eased the privacy cover off the passenger window and peered out. Past the brush line in the wash, I saw movement. It was upright, which made me initially think it was a person. But the gait was utterly wrong. It didn't bounce or swing. It was a fast, unnatural glide, a pivot rather than a step. Its elbows hung too low when it leaned forward. It darted left, then right, moving impossibly fast for the terrain. I instantly pulled the cover back down and told myself I was tired and dramatizing shadows. Then, the older guy's Sprinter light flashed once, a single, quick beat. Then went dark again. It felt like he had seen the same thing and decided to go completely silent. The handprint and the smell. I listened for footsteps crunching on the gravel, but what I heard made less sense. It was a slow, deliberate sound, soft, like heavy weight sinking into thick padding. It was circling the van. Then it stopped right by the passenger side. I slid my eyes over to the window cover. Condensation had gathered on the cold glass, and right in the middle, a handprint formed high up on the glass. It had 5 long fingers, and the palm was narrow. It slid a fraction of an inch, as if the weight shifted. My partner and I were frozen. When I finally dared to touch the faint smear with my fingertip, a smell transferred to my skin. Hot metal, like pennies or old coins, mixed with something earthy. Then the rear doors were subtly tugged. Not a frantic rattling, but a steady, inward pressure, like someone was testing the flexibility of the metal. The inner door skin flexed just enough for me to feel it through the bed frame. The escape. My partner whispered that the keys were in the cup holder. Our voices were flat and low, stripped of any emotion. The way you speak when there's no room for anything but necessary information. I slid into the driver's seat and put the keys in the ignition. The engine ground once, nearly dying, making my teeth clench. But then it finally roared to life. The van shook, and the headlights punched out into the dark. At the very edge of the light cone, the shape straightened up from the waist in one fast, impossible line. It leaned toward us slowly, studying our reaction. I put the van in drive and eased forward carefully, terrified of spinning the tires and getting stuck. As we moved, the figure moved with us, keeping perfect pace along the brush line, always just outside the full beam of the lights. Suddenly, the older man's headlights came on behind us with a sharp flash. He pulled up close, then immediately swung out and took the lead. He didn't honk or yell. He just drove, keeping his brights angled across the wash, sweeping the darkness ahead of us. For a second, his powerful beams caught a section of the wash, and I saw a hand braced high against a branch, at a height that defied gravity. We stayed glued to his bumper. As we finally climbed the slight lip onto the highway, the van gave a small, distinct twitch, like that same inward pressure was applied one last time to the rear doors, and then it was gone. The final word. We followed the older man without speaking until we reached the bright, noisy safety of a Chevron station. We pulled up next to him. He stepped out, rugged and calm, looked at our terrified dog, whose head was finally out of the blankets, and gave her a nod. He didn't ask if we were okay or what we saw. He just said, "You saw it too." I said yes. He walked to the back of his own Sprinter and pointed. There was a long, oily smear at shoulder height, with 5 faint finger tracks pressed into it. He looked me dead in the eye and gave us the only advice he had. "I've seen it out by little. It's a skinwalker. Don't camp in the washes." He didn't make a big show of it. He just nodded at our dog, "Good dog," and drove off without fueling up. We spent the rest of the night in a state park with pay boxes and posted rules. But I will never forget that metallic smell or that long, impossible handprint on the glass. If your dog won't settle and you're near a wash, move. If the night is too quiet, move. Story 2. It was late November, and I was holding down the graveyard shift at the Speedway station on US 64 in Shiprock. You know how it is. Rent doesn't pay itself, so you take the late hours. The wind was a constant, nasty thing, pushing dust across the lot and making the thin metal of the car wash bay rattle like crazy. Nights at a place like that are simple if you can handle the isolation. Keep the coffee brewing, cycle the hot food in the case, face the shelves, and mop before 4 a.m. My manager was home sleeping, and my only company was Evan, a high school kid who mopped for cash, and a scruffy black and tan stray dog that lived off the dumpster. We didn't feed it, but we didn't chase it off either. Around 2 a.m., the highway felt like a dead river. The pumps were empty, and the only sounds were the hum of the beer cooler and the faint smell of burnt coffee. I was counting the safe drop money when the door chime dinged. The ripple in the mop bucket. I looked up, expecting some tired tourist or someone desperate for cigarettes, but there was no one in the entryway. Both doors were closed, and the air inside was still. I walked around the counter to check the aisles, feeling ridiculous. But you check anyway. When I got near the bathrooms, I saw the mop bucket. The water had a tight ring of ripples moving out from the center. That's not a draft. That's something large passing close enough to shake the water itself. I stared at the fading ring until it was flat again. I moved to the front windows to check the lot. The stray dog was out by the dumpster. I watched it stiffen, its hair standing straight up. It started taking short, backward steps, locking its eyes on the front door. It wasn't the posture of a dog that smelled food. It was a primal, hardwired fear that said, "Something is wrong, and I don't want my eyes on it." The shape, at the pump at 2:14 a.m., I saw it. A tall shape crossed under the canopy and stopped at pump 8. It seemed to set its weight down, like a person fueling a car, only there was no car. Dust swirled around the pump island in the bright light rectangle, and the figure just stood there. It was too tall for its width. Its shoulders looked unnaturally tucked in. I froze. No headlights, no engine sounds, just this shape. Evan, the kid, asked quietly from the back if he should lock the interior deadbolt. "Not yet," I whispered. I looked again, and the figure was gone from the pump. In the next moment, it was at the ice freezer along the front wall. No transition, just there. The freezer lid shifted an inch, and a thin fog bled out. Then the lid came back down softly, not the heavy clack of someone dropping it. Next, a section of the long front glass went dark. the way it does when someone stands inches from it on the other side, blocking the interior light. There was no face, just a vertical column of darker night held at the wrong height, lining up perfectly with the register. The testing and the bar eye quickly told Evan to lock the inner deadbolt. We heard the small click. Immediately, the door handle jiggled half an inch, then the door pressed inward against the latch with steady, silent weight. The metal handle gave a dry squeak, and the rubber seal made a long, dragging sound. I hit the intercom button to talk to the pumps. I got static, then a single, drawn-out breath, and then silence. I didn't press the button again. Around 2:48 a.m., the noise started at the back delivery dock. It was a metal-on-galvanized steel scrape, slow and regular, like a thin hook working its way up the underside of the roll-up door. Then, a hand-over-hand pattern began, climbing the metal corrugations. The dock light actually dimmed when the weight reached its height and brightened again as the weight moved. It was climbing. Down, up, down. Not fast, like it had endless time. I slid the heavy steel brace bar into the back door's brackets. We were trapped. The dog and the bend. The shape began to methodically move along the front windows, standing at each pane until the dark vertical strip perfectly matched the window mullion, and then it would slide to the next. Then I saw the dog. It had shoved itself into the tight inner corner of the car wash bay, nose jammed into the seam where wall met wall, body locked tight. It didn't respond to my soft calls. Finally, around 3:30 a.m., the figure stood in the mouth of the car wash bay, completely filling the opening. It was too tall for the frame. Then it bent. Not a head tilt or a slouch. It folded from the middle until its head was precisely level with my eyes at the register. It had done the geometry right. Evan whispered not to move. I grabbed the steel bar and brought it down hard on the metal floor drain grate. Clang! Clang! The sound echoed through the silent aisles. The figure didn't flinch. It straightened in a single long step and was farther from the bay than any person could have moved in that time. When the manager finally arrived after 7 a.m., I showed him the back door. There were 2 long, clean scratches cut into the paint under the latch, and a greasy smear high up, a stretched hand shape that was taller than any normal person. My manager didn't laugh or tell me to call the police for a vandal. He said, "Next time, call Navajo PD. Tell them you think it's a Skinwalker. They'll know what to do." He offered me the day shift. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The stray dog never came back. That's the whole story. Story 3. I'm not sharing this for some cheap thrill. I'm sharing it because I learned a rule the hard way, and I don't want anyone else making the same mistake. If you ever take the unpaved road along the rim at Angel Peak Scenic Area, near Bloomfield, New Mexico, and plan to stay past dark, bring another vehicle and park nose out. It was late October, and my spouse and I picked a remote bluff-top pullout. The air was cool and the sky was so clean you felt like you could drink it. We were there for landscape photography, but this wasn't a big professional trip, just a cheap lantern, an old enamel pot, and some paperbacks. Our old 4Runner knew the road well. It has a ladder rack on the back that rattles when you climb it. We weren't the only ones there. 2 sites over, a family in a red pickup was building a quick camp. No music, no generator, just the sound of the wind coming off the Badlands and the smell of sage. As I was stirring ramen, movement on the rim path caught my eye. At first, I thought it was a jogger, which seemed absurd out here, but the motion itself was what was wrong. The figure moved low, torso level, gliding more than stepping. It traced the edge of the bluff in a slow, lazy arc, staying just far enough away that I couldn't make out any details. It was just a shape that was always effortlessly in motion. It never changed pace, even going up small inclines. It just slid over the ground as if on rails. The family nearby had gone silent. The dad was standing by their truck bed, facing away from the beautiful view and looking straight toward the rim where I'd last seen the shape. The dark came over us almost instantly. We turned the lantern low. I did my camp chores, stowing the bowls and tying down a tarp. The wind started making uneven pushes behind me, and then I heard it. Small pebbles ticking down the slope. I turned the lantern toward the sound and it instantly cut off. I set the lantern down, and the sound started again. This time from farther left, then from the right, then directly behind the shelter post. Small rocks don't roll uphill, and this felt patterned, like something testing how close it could get without being seen. I walked to the back of the Forerunner to put away a pot. On the dusty bumper near the ladder rack, I saw a mark. It looked like someone had pressed a hand into the dust, but it was all wrong. The palm was long and narrow, and the knuckle spots were spaced out in a way my brain couldn't recognize as normal. When I touched it, a little drift of powder fell off the bumper. "Hey," my spouse whispered from the shelter. "I think they're packing." The family 2 sites over was breaking camp silently and incredibly fast. The dad looked across the space between us and mouthed 2 words. "Car. Now!" We moved like we were drilled, lantern low, chairs folded, everything tossed into the back without sorting. As we were shutting the rear hatch, the family's truck was already idling, nose pointed toward the track. Down the slope, a dry scrape moved across stone and stopped. We pulled out first. As the Forerunner nosed over a dip in the dirt road, the back end sagged hard, like 2 people had suddenly stepped onto the rear ladder. The steering went light. The metal in the rack gave off a groan I'd never heard before. Then, a heavy drop hit the gravel behind us. Not a rock that bounced, but a one-piece landing, followed by a lighter thump. I looked in the mirror and saw dust hanging low. Something long dragged along the passenger side rear quarter panel as it regained balance. The sound was thin and clean, like a screwdriver line across paint. The family's truck tapped its brakes twice, giving us space. We kept moving. We hit the main highway, still driving in tandem. We finally pulled into a brightly lit gas station lot in Bloomfield. The dad from the red truck walked to the back of his vehicle. The red plastic of his taillight had 4 deep gouges carved into it. The spacing was wrong for human fingers, curving inward. He looked at me, serious and calm, and said the only sentence that mattered: "Folks call it a skinwalker. Don't camp up there solo after Halloween." We checked our Forerunner. A clean, planned scratch started under the ladder rack, tracked forward across the quarter panel, and ended at the fuel door. It wasn't jagged like a branch. It was a single, confident movement. The paint had a pale curl at the edge. The next day, after driving home, I found the top bolts of the ladder rack were shiny, rubbed with fine grit, but only on the faces that would get contact if something slid forward and then off. The way the back end dropped taught me everything I needed to know. The scratch is still there, a faint healed cut under the clear coat, a permanent reminder not to break the rules. Story 4. I'm not posting this for thrills. I'm posting it because I learned a rule the hard way. I was a student at Northern Arizona University, and like a lot of people in Flagstaff, I used Walnut Canyon as my personal gym with scenery. It's close, well-marked, and you learn fast to carry a jacket and a light because the temperature drops out there the minute the sun goes down. A couple of years ago, 4 of us, myself, Maya, Ben, and Ty, tried to squeeze in the island trail after class, trying to beat the visitor center closing time. I was usually the map guy. Maya carried the first aid. Ben was strong but clumsy on the rocks, and Ty was the one cracking jokes in sneakers. We dropped down the stairs, checked out the cliff dwellings, and started climbing back up with that urgent, time-crunched feeling when the shadows get long. At the top of the main stairs, the official route bends right, but to the left, There was a thin, obvious footpath that skimmed the rim. It looked fresh, like a dozen people had used it that day. I figured it would cut 5 minutes off our walk. No one argued. The light was fading fast. The first few 100 yards felt fine. Then we walked past something that instantly shut Ty up mid-sentence. Tucked behind a limestone lip was a deer laid out like a laboratory specimen. It wasn't scattered or dragged. The rib cage was clean, scraped dry, and the hide was folded back in a neat line, like a jacket someone had just taken off. There were no tracks or scuffs around it. Strangest of all, there was a fist-sized rock balanced on one of the exposed ribs, like a paperweight. I looked for footprints. A couple of feet away, on a patch of dust, there were impressions that started out human-shaped. Barefoot, clear heel, clear ball. But after a few steps, the angles shifted. The feet turned inward. For 6 or 7 steps, the toe arcs faced the wrong way, as if whoever made them was walking forward with their feet rotated 180 degrees. Maya said, very evenly, "We should keep moving and get back on the real trail." As we walked faster, I started noticing something else. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but whenever we stepped, something stepped through the brush off to our left at the exact same pace, like a metronome you couldn't turn off. When we paused, it paused. When we angled around a rock, it adjusted in the same beat. I tried to catch a glimpse, but only got partial views. An outline between trunks, a shoulder behind a boulder, a vertical shape that never quite entered the light. I decided to test it. I picked up a softball-sized rock and threw it hard into the scrub where the movement had just stopped. It landed with a muffled thump. A heartbeat later, a second rock clicked back from what sounded like the exact same patch of ground. There was no time for a person to retrieve, set, and throw back my rock. Ty went silent again. Then Ben stepped on a slanted piece of basalt and twisted his ankle hard. He went down with an ugly, honest pain sound. Maya quickly wrapped it. As we started hobbling toward the maintenance yard, the thing in the brush adjusted to our slow pace, like it had been doing drills with us all week. We finally reached the chain-link fence around the staff buildings. The security lights popped on, offering a false sense of safety, but the nearest gate was locked. Outside the fence, in the tree line, a silhouette stood and matched our position step for step. The arms hung lower than I expected, and the way the head tilted was wrong. Then, a staff guy on a utility cart rounded the far end. He took in the situation instantly and waved us hard toward a service gate around the corner. As we hobbled, the silhouette switched posture, from standing still to ready to run, and broke into a smooth sprint parallel to us, keeping a strict distance from the light line. It didn't pump its arms right. It just ate the ground in an easy, terrifying way. Just as we reached the maintenance worker, Ben lost his footing and put a hand on the ground. I went to grab his arm, and something else got there first. From the fence line shadow, it was a strong, steady push at his upper arm, but the pressure points didn't line up with a normal hand. The grip had too much spread between the fingers, and the skin contact was ice cold. Ben lurched up like someone had hauled him by a handle. The maintenance worker swiftly opened the service gate, waved us through, and locked it behind us. He pointed to the dust outside the fence. 2 clean impressions, toes facing back toward the canyon. He just said, "Don't cut the trail there. Some things track you when you break rules." Days later, Ben sent a photo of his arm. He had a bruise forming in the shape of a handprint, but the fingers were long bars of pressure that didn't match anyone in our group. That bruise took nearly 3 weeks to fade. I don't use the word Skinwalker lightly, but the pacing, the mirroring, the matching steps, and the unnaturally long grip all fit the description of what students around here warn against. I've thrown rocks in the woods many times. I've never had the exact same weight answer me from the same spot, in the same second. The 5-minute shortcut wasn't a shortcut. It was a mistake. Story 5. I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm just putting down what happened so I can stop replaying it in my head. Last November, my little brother and I were doing a budget road trip loop through the Southwest. Cheap motel to cheap motel. Cooler in the back seat. Miles between us and our inboxes. We came down from Moab and hit US 163 right as the sun was dipping behind the buttes near the Utah-Arizona line. We pulled into that famous viewpoint turnout, around mile marker 13, and stood there, hands tucked deep in our pockets, watching the red rock turn to rust, and then to a flat kind of gray. A group of tourists wished us good night and drove off. We stayed, stubborn, waiting for the first stars. By the time we climbed back in the car, it was completely dark. I eased forward to merge back onto the highway and bumped over something I never saw. A thin shard, maybe. The right rear tire thumped twice and went soft. We rolled back into the pullout because there was nowhere else to go. Changing a flat wasn't a big deal, just annoying. We set the hazard lights, got the scissor jack and the compact spare out of the trunk, and started working. The air was clean and desert cold, but a smell drifted in between gusts that didn't fit the temperature at all. It was metallic, like hot coins, mixed with the kind of damp hair smell you get when someone pulls off a hat after a long run. I told myself it was hot brakes from a distant semi. As I pumped the jack handle, my brother stopped talking about breakfast and started looking past me, toward the livestock fence and the open scrub across the highway. He finally muttered, "Something's pacing, man." He claimed it was keeping perfect, measured time with the jack handle. When I paused to reposition, the light clicks of gravel footfalls across the road also paused. When I started cranking again, the clicks started again. It was a rhythmic, matched pattern. My brother said, "It's staying right at the edge of the lights. It doesn't want the full beam." We got the flat wheel off. The smell got stronger, sharper. As I was lining up the spare, the car gave a small, off-timed rock from the front, not the side we had lifted. It wasn't big, more like someone had leaned their hip into the bumper. I put a hand on the quarter panel and sharply said, "Hey." Something long and low slid under the front bumper from the darkness. I thought it was a branch, but it lifted just enough to graze the metal. I heard it more than saw it. A slow drag across the oil pan, ending with a faint ping near the cross member, like a fingernail flicking a spoon. The car shifted that small amount a second time. Headlights were approaching, maybe a minute away. Whatever was under the front pulled back, tucking into the blind wedge on the passenger side so the oncoming beam wouldn't catch it clean. My brother was white-knuckled. He grabbed the reflective safety triangle and the road flare. "I'm going past it," he said. He struck the flare and sprinted a few steps, throwing the triangle not at the shape, but past it into the scrub. The flare landed, and the red wash of light lit the scene from behind. For a blink, the brush was backlit, and whatever had been tracking the car showed more of itself. A torso that was too long, knees that worked, then didn't, and arms with too much reach. It flinched like any living thing would from a blast of heat and light and peeled away in a low lunge that covered impossible ground, sinking behind a hump of brush. The metallic smell thinned with it. The oncoming car slid by, oblivious. We quickly bolted the spare on. I put the car in gear, and we pulled out, the burning triangle visible in the rearview mirror. The red light caught the front of our car from below, and I saw a row of straight, fresh gouges beneath the license plate bracket that hadn't been there when we started. We drove to Kayenta and checked into a chain hotel under the brightest floodlights we could find. The next morning, we found a local man at breakfast and told him the flat tire story, leaving out the drama. He listened, nodded, and finally said, "Don't stop on that road after dark. People around here would call that a skinwalker. Keep moving." We took the rental back, paid the extra charge for the damage, and didn't look back. I can't prove anything beyond a charge on a credit card and a set of grooves on a bumper, but I can say the steps matched the jack handle like someone timing us. And I'll tell you the same thing the man told us. If the sun is down and the road is that empty, keep rolling. If you get forced off, set the flare where it lights the place a threat wants to use, not where it can stay hidden. It isn't a brave rule, just a practical one. Keep moving. Subscribe for more real horror stories.